I did a matrix on Martin Luther King Jr. We did sequencing. I'm going to start with DOK1. We used Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fact sentences to match to pictures and put in the correct order. And here in the pocket chart we have these sentences that the students used. They learned about doing different stories we read and activities, and then they were able to identify them and put them in the correct order from what happened first to what happened last in the life of Dr. King. And then we have DOK2, describe the sequence of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life using transition words in a composition and illustrations. And the students did this down here. They used transition words first, next, then, and finally, which are part of West Virginia Rights for second grade. So they took facts that they had learned, the fact sentences that we used in our pocket chart, and they put them into a written composition using transition words appropriately. The next thing we did was another DOK2, use a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. poster to draw conclusions using the See, Think, Wonder strategy. I showed them a picture of Dr. King giving his I Have a Dream speech, and they just used the picture and they identified things they saw first, and then what they thought and what they wondered about, and they did a lot of, they had a lot of good questions. I think this was a topic that they weren't really familiar with, so they had a lot of questions and things they wondered about in the picture, and they were able to later, at the end of our lesson, make connections to the things they were wondering about. So I thought that was really good. And the other DOK2, construct sequence circles using important events in the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Choose one event and change it and describe what might happen. So the students used these sequence circles that already had dates and events that happened, and they were spread out, and they had to find them and put them in sequential order. And I had them do it by, some of them did it by date, some of them did it by the size of the circle. Some of them noticed that the different colors, so there were different ways they could look at each of these circles and decide what order they went in sequentially, not just by the date. So I thought that was interesting that without me telling them, they recognized the different ways they could put something in order. So once they put them in order, I asked them which fact, if that did not occur, if that did not happen, how would things be different? And then they wrote on each of these papers how things would be different nowadays if, for example, if Martin Luther King Jr. would not have been born, we would not have heard his speech, I Have a Dream. So I thought that was really good that the student was able to make that connection, and she realized the importance of a speech like I Have a Dream and the impact it had, and how things would have been different if we would not have had that experience. So I thought that was really good. And then a DOK3, using the virtual field trip of the Civil Rights Movement, plan a trip through the U.S. cities for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to travel through. So once we had discussed the Civil Rights Movement for a little while, we used a website online that you could map out the cities that Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement traveled through. So the students identified 7 cities where they thought were key events in the Civil Rights Movement, and they located them on a map. And then they also identified the year and the city and state to where that event happened. And then they cut them out, and then they put them in the appropriate boxes and labeled them on a map. And then we just kind of talked about locations and stuff like that, and the importance of each of those events. So it was them deciding what was important and what was not, because obviously there was lots of moments in the Civil Rights Movement. So it was good for them to kind of decide what was relevant and what wasn't. So that's what we did for Martin Luther King.
matrix. The DOK one that I posted on the wall is, they were to recall the events of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life using a printable book titled Martin Luther King Jr.'s Dream. This is the book, and the first activity for the students was they had to take the pages and put them in sequential order to make the book. And after they put the book in sequential order, we talked about Dr. Martin Luther King and about friendship, and they did a friends counting together activity where they had to put their numbers in sequential order. And that was all part of my DOK1 order. The DOK2 that I worked with was the strategy See, Think, and Wonder. And the picture for the See, Think, Wonder was it was actually Martin Luther King Jr. as a boy with his mother. And the students did a great job at this. They were able to pick things out of that picture that I was surprised. For example, the fire hydrant, they picked out a trash can that I did not, myself, when I looked at the picture, realize was a trash can. They had great thoughts, and they had a lot of good questions during the What I Wonder that they were able to answer. That's part of DOK2. The other part was to analyze and sequence. And what the students had to do on this is they had to cut, arrange, sequence, and glue the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. using sentence strips. And they did a great job at that as well. So that was DOK2, analyze and sequence. And then for my DOK3, the students had to create, following an order. They had the directions in order, and they had to follow the order of the directions to create a picture or a activity with Martin Luther King Jr. And then they had to connect it to their real life. What would their dream be if they were able to write that? And I thought these connections were amazing. I mean, this is coming from mentally impaired students, and some of their thoughts were, I mean, they would dream that all people would get together and be safe, and that they had a dream that everybody could be friends and that everyone would talk to each other. And I just thought that was relevant to their life and sometimes how students are treated. So that is my gallery walk.
I'm just gonna look at each. Let me do the